the American Australian Association, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this immigration update. I'm Louisa Teo, Regional Director of the Association's New England chapter, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Zjantelle Cammisa Markel. Born and bred in Adelaide and based in New York City, Zjantelle has processed thousands of visas for individuals with backgrounds just like those of you in our audience today. Welcome, Zjantelle. I'd also like to acknowledge our audience today. We have folks joining us from Memphis, Minneapolis, Madison, and Moonee Ponds, which says a lot about the Australian diaspora. Although we are dispersed, we're not alone, and there are many Australians in similar situations at this time. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. We've worked these into the content today, and we will be addressing your questions throughout the seminar. So let's get started, Zjantelle.
Hi, Louisa. Thanks for having me back again. It's such my pleasure. Just up front, I want to say we do have a lot of content to get through. There were so many questions, and we did want to try to answer everyone's questions that came through. So we put together as comprehensive information as possible, and we have some slides. We will make those slides available at the end, so don't feel stressed out like you've got to take notes or anything like that. There are a couple of questions that we couldn't really weave into the content. So I think, Louisa, you'll perhaps ask me those questions towards the end so that then we really have covered everyone's question that asked and is probably tuning in to see if their question is answered. Rather than asking each question and answering each question that came in, what we did was we grouped, we looked at the questions cumulatively and then created content around the different questions. And then through that content, hopefully each person's question will be answered. And so just as an overview, most of the questions that came in were from either E3 visa holders, a couple from different non-immigrant visa holders, some from people that won the DV lottery and are wondering about the date that they need to enter the US by, and we'll go through that. That comes up under the Presidential Proclamations that are coming to an end. And then there were a lot of questions from green card holders again, who left the United States back in March and are still in Australia or still abroad and have not come back to the US yet, and they're worried about preserving their green card. So we will cover that as well. Back to the E3s, the updates that we're going to cover on those are, there was a whole thing with prevailing wages that happened in the last couple of months. There's a lot of questions, which these questions with respect to a long dated R94 on LCA has been a question that's come up a lot. And I haven't really ever addressed it because it's been a grey area, but I feel like it does always come up. So tonight I'm going to talk about my views on that. And then again, the hot topic, always the hot topic, which is where can I go to renew my E3 or get a new E3? What if I don't want to travel? What are my options? What are my alternatives to going abroad? So these are the topics we're going to cover tonight, Louisa.
Okay, great. Before we jump in though, Zjantelle, I can already see that there's going to be some terminology here, like I-94, LCA, the alphabet soup of different visa categories. Can you just give the audience and myself a quick refresher on some of these terms?
Yeah, sure. I think, one of the ones that are the most important, we've got the I-94. If anyone is watching this and you don't know what I almost didn't put this in, but I know, Louisa, you really wanted me to, just because some people don't know, but if you don't know what an I-94 is, you're in big trouble, okay? You need to know what your I-94 is, which is the document. So every time you enter the United States as a non-immigrant, the immigration officer inspects you and gives you a date that you're allowed to remain in the United States until. And that date, it used to be on a piece of paper, now you retrieve it electronically, and you can see there the website where you can retrieve it. You put in your passport details, your date of birth, your name, and it will automatically spit back to you your I-94, which shows you the date you're allowed to remain in the United States until. It's really important that you check that after every trip back into the United States because it changes every single time. And if you don't keep an eye on it and they incorrectly date your I-94, it can have very big consequences. The reason we are talking about it in the definition tonight is because we're going to be having a whole discussion on those long dated I-94s for that big group of people that did ask a lot of questions about that. Visa stamp, that's your sticker in your passport, the visa sticker. LCA, that's if you're on an E3 or an H1B, you would have had an LCA filed for you, which determines the wage rate that your employer needs to pay you at. And it also, for an E3, determines the period that you're authorized to work in the United States, the dates of that LCA's validity. And we're going to be talking about LCAs and I-94s coming up and how they interrelate with each other and your visa ending. So that's what an LCA is. And all the people on an E3s know what an LCA and an I-94 and all this is anyway. But just as a refresher for anyone else that might have forgotten that's listening through the parts that may not necessarily relate to them.
So Zjantelle, one of the major issues for E3 holders in the last few months have been around prevailing wages. And I know there's been a lot of stress around this. So if you can cover some of the issues that people are facing right now, that would be great.
Absolutely. So what happened, Louisa, was on October 8th, the Department of Labor issued an interim final rule, which made the prevailing wage rates jump significantly. So for anyone that needed to file a new LCA, so needed to renew their visa, and if they were renewing their visa, they needed to file a new LCA for an E3 or even an H1B, it affected that category too. And then when they were looking at the prevailing wages, they had jumped so high that people had to look for alternate wage sources. They had to perhaps employers had to consider changing the benefits structure that they had to increase the wages so that it would meet the LCA new prevailing wage rate. In some circumstances, the wages jumped so high that some people's employers said, I can't renew your visa. Or if they were being considered for a job offer, they were missing out on job offers. I'm going to show you a little bit what it looked like. So for example, this is for market research analysts and marketing specialists. The reason this one looks a bit unattractive is because it's a photo, because you can't get this wage data anymore because it's reverted back to this. But so on October 8th, the wage, so this one for marketing specialist went from 47,590 as the prevailing wage rate for wage level 1, jumped right up to $73,091, right? So what this means is if you were here and as a marketing specialist and your wage was 50,000 and you needed to renew your visa, or you were getting a job offer and the wage that the employer was willing to offer was 50,000, suddenly you're going to that employer and saying, my wage now needs to be around 74,000. Can you give me a $24,000 wage increase? So it was really, really difficult for many, many people. I know we have a lot of CEOs and CFOs that are part of executives that are part of the AAA. So just so that they are aware of what it looked like in case they didn't get to see this. So for executives, it went for, this wage data was for a client that was in Boston at the time, but the prevailing wage rate went from 117 for the lowest level to the minimum being 208, which is quite a significant jump there. So if you were at 120, now you're saying, oh, I need to be at 208. And if you couldn't meet this 208, you would need to use alternate wage sources or figure something else out. So fortunately, what happened was on December 1, there was the District Court of California, Northern District Court of California, set aside the final interim rule, and those wages have reverted back now to what they were pre-October 8th. So they're back to this now. So that's provided a lot of relief. But the reason I really wanted to highlight it is that we had a client, for example, who she was a communications specialist and her wage rate was exactly one of those. She was on, I think, 45,000 a year, and suddenly the minimum that she could get paid was around 72. And she went to her employer and they said, I'm sorry, we can't increase it. And she necessarily did have to renew her visa at that time. And so she ended up going back to Australia. So someone like her right now could reach back out to her employer and say, hey, the wage rate has come back down again. I can renew at the wage rate that you were willing to pay me. Can we reconsider? We can now file an E3 for her because she had her last visa was an E3. She could even do the mail-in that visa application in Australia, get the visa and come back. Whereas if we didn't have this court case, that wouldn't have been an option for her. So anyone that did miss out on an opportunity because of those wage rates should reach back out to those employers. And any employers that passed over candidates because of that wage data can reconsider hiring people again, and some good candidates that they might have passed over for that very reason. So the other thing I wanted to point out is that this wage rate does change every year on June 30th. So July 1, you'll always see on the wage data. Let me take you here. It will show you the wage rates change, and it's always for a year. The year here starts always July 1. So these wage rates will definitely change again in July 2021. Could they change before that? Potentially, yes. There is under our current administration, which will change in January, but the goal has always been to protect American workers and increase the wages of foreign workers to protect those American jobs. So now's a good time. If you need a lock-in, if salary is something that is could be an issue with your renewal, an upcoming renewal, it might make sense to even file an LCA early, so you have one there. You can always use an LCA at any point, even if it started a couple of months ago. So say you file one now and in February or March, the wage rates jump again, but you have one that you filed now and it's valid for 2 years, you could still use that one. So some people might decide to preemptively file an LCA now while these wage rates are like this. So the other big news that's relevant right now, Louisa, is the Presidential Proclamations. And when we spoke about those in some of our previous webinars and what they meant and who they affected, and they're anticipated to come to an end very soon, December 31st. A few people have asked, do we think that they could get extended? They could, yes, that is true. But our current administration does end on January 20th. So I think, if it did get extended, it might not last too much longer beyond January 20th. But what does it mean, these proclamations coming to an end? Well, the main non-immigrant categories that the proclamation affected were for H-1B visa holders, H-2Bs, J-1s, L-1s, and the way it affected those people is that if they didn't have a valid visa in their passport, they couldn't get a new L1 or a new H1B or a new J1 to enter the US. If they had one already, it was fine. But if they didn't, they couldn't get one abroad to get back in. There were some exemptions and they could apply for a national interest exemption, but it definitely was made difficult for those visa categories. And I know that we do have a lot of Aussies, not only on H1Bs and Ls, but also that use that J1 visa program, particularly a lot of our hospitality clients who have been significantly affected this year, but they have a lot of these summer work travel J1s that work with them. And they haven't been able to get any, they haven't been able to be issued any J1s, student work travel J1s since June. So now we'll hopefully be able to see the resumption of that program and people coming in on that in the new year. Again, there's still the difficulties and hoops of trying to get a visa and a consulate appointment, but if you can get around those, at least the proclamation will end that will allow these visas to actually be issued into people's passports. The other categories, significant category that is going to benefit from the end of the proclamation coming to an end, were certain green card holder categories, and those were employment-based green card holders that had opted for consular processing outside the US. They weren't issuing those green cards outside the US. So those people that have been waiting for a green card outside the US will now be able to get those, as well as spouses of green card holders. It did not affect spouses of US citizens, but spouses of green card holders it did, and siblings and married children of US citizens it did. So now those people can get their green cards issued to be able to finally enter the US, which will be great as of January 2021. Just the ring of 2021 sounds so good. The other group, and we did get a lot of questions from this group, the DV Green Card Lottery winners, the 2020 group of winners. They were the most significantly affected by the proclamation in both April and June, when it was extended in June. And so what had happened was, these are the DV winners that they would have found out in May of 2019, and they would have they had the window of October 2019 to September 2020 to get that immigrant visa, which is a green card sticker, issued into their passport. And what happened was, the consulates stopped even giving out these green card stickers, because they said, well, you can't come in on it until after December 31st anyway, so you're just going to miss out. So all those people thought, oh my God, I won the green card lottery and now I've missed out. And then there was a court case that in August that said, no, you know what, we got that wrong. The sticker can be issued, but they just still can't. That proclamation prevented them from entering, but it didn't prevent them from getting the sticker in their passport. So then the consulates frantically, and all our clients in Australia were frantically getting their green card interview for their DV lottery. And the consulates really did accommodate those and try to accommodate those. We saw consulates reaching out to people and saying, come in for your green card interview. And they did, and they issued, they got issued by September 30th of 2020. So all those people that did manage to get their green card sticker issued in their passport by September 30th have now been sitting in Australia and not able to enter, not like they've been wanting to enter anyway, but they haven't been able to. They couldn't even enter if they wanted to on that green card sticker. The thing is that they have to enter by a certain time. So they have to enter by the date that their green card sticker expires. So they made the end of the visa sticker the date that the person's medical ended. So people were frantically getting new medicals as of the date of their visa interview. So if your medical, you last got your medical in August, your visa is going to expire in February. If you got your medical in September, your visa is going to expire in March. In any event, because the green card medical is only valid for 6 months and you had to get your green card sticker issued by September 30th, all of those people will have to enter by March 30th, 2021. So we had a lot of questions from people. There was one person that emailed Louisa, really super concerned with, I'm still not ready to enter by March 30th. There's still no vaccine. I'm scared to travel. Do I have to enter by that date? You do have to enter by the date of the expiry of that immigrant visa in your passport. Otherwise, you won't get issued the green card. So you need to enter on that green card sticker while it's valid to get into the US, and then they will issue you and mail you the actual green card. Back last March, they did say we're going to extend, people can get a new immigrant visa issued if they can't come in. I don't know if that's going to happen again, and I almost think it might not. So people really should aim to come in on that green card sticker before it expires, so that they can get that green card issued and keep it from that winning. So it's coming to the end of the journey for those green card DV lottery winners that had a really rough time this time round. And just a reminder to that group, please do pay your immigrant visa fee prior to entry to the US if you haven't done so already, because you need to have paid that for the USCIS to actually mail you that physical green card. So yeah, so the end of the proclamations means it's going to open up borders to a lot of non-immigrant and immigrant green card holder groups that have been restricted from being able to travel and get visas and come into the US and take advantage of green cards. So this is a great thing. So we are really looking forward to this, Louisa.
So the next thing that we got a lot of questions about, Zjantelle, were around the 3 key pieces of paperwork: the I-94, the LCA, and the visa. And while we're thinking about dates by which, you know, people have to do such and such, I'm wondering if you could talk about how to make sure these dates align and so people don't run the risk of something bad happening.
Okay. So where you're talking about different dates and I-94s and LCA and visa end dates, where we had a lot of questions. So this is really aimed at the E3 visa holders now. So I apologize for the people that are, you know, on green cards and have to sit through this bit. But I do want to cover this bit just because we did get so many questions on it. And it is confusing and it's causing a lot of people some grief. So, and it is a really grey area. So I'm going to share my views, and they're just views because it's a grey area. So I'm going to tell you what my thoughts on this are. So what we've been seeing is people are checking their I-94s when they're on an E3, and they're getting like a whole different range of end dates. They're getting, in this instance, you can see here, a lot of people are getting 2 years from the date they last entered. So if you look at this here, this person entered on January 7th, 2020, and then they were granted 2 years admission. This is the corresponding visa for this person. So this person's visa was valid from March 2019 to the 26th of February 2021. So other times, this same person probably has looked at their I-94 on other times, and they've seen that maybe their I-94 ended on the visa expiration date, which is 26th of February 2021. And other times they might have noticed that their I-94 ended on the 22nd of March 2021, which is the LCA end date. So the correct way an I-94 for an E3 is supposed to be marked, and this is in the Adjudicator's Field Manual, which is the guidance to the immigration officers at the airport, but you know, they seem to get muddled up with the E1 and E2 visa. And the E1 and E2 visas get 2 years every time they enter the US. So that's why when you see 2 years from the last date you entered, they're applying the E1, E2 rules to that. But the AFM does actually guide the CBP officer and says, well, technically, the person is only authorized to work in the US up until the date that their LCA is valid. And so really, the LCA, the I-94 end date should be expiring with the LCA end date. So technically, this person's I-94 should have ended on the 22nd of March, 2021. So what is the situation here? So this was a client, Mr. Sydney Bridge, came to my office and said, the dates actually here are accurate from someone's visa, but we obviously changed the names and so forth. But so Mr. Bridge over here, born in 1923, and we learned that that was the date of the bridge. Anyway, so I'm getting sidetracked. That this person says, okay, well, my visa expires on the 26th of February. My I-94 goes to the 22nd of March. My I-94, sorry, goes a year, and my LCI expires on the 22nd of March. What am I doing here? When am I allowed to stay until? When do I have to renew? Can I just hang out here? Because, you know, I've heard you say 1,000 times your I-94 trumps everything. So that gives me till 2022. So why can I just hang out on this and file another LCA? So this person right now is authorized to be here, because this date goes until 2022, and legally work until the 22nd of March, 2021. Even though the visa expires 26th of February. So technically this person could leave on the 20th of March to go renew their visa and get with a new LCA and come back, and then everything's great. They've got their new visa with a new LCA attached, and that's the perfect world. Some people, back when there was absolutely zero travel and zero consulates opened, people were saying, well, technically, can you argue that you could stay here on this long dated I-94 and just file a new LCA, because then you do have an LCA and an I-94? Well, the E3 was, this is my view, the E3 was modeled on the H-1B visa. every time you renew, file a new LCA for an H-1B, you are required to file a new petition and get a new visa for that H-1B because the LCA is integral to it. And when you think about it, when you apply for an E3, they're adjudicating your LCA. It's practically the only document they're really, really concentrating on when you go to that appointment. They're adjudicating that LCA. They're looking at the SOC code and is this a specialty occupation through that, and what's your wage, and you're getting paid the right rate. They're really adjudicating the visa on that LCA. So much so that if you look back at this visa, they are putting the visa expiration date here, the LCA expiration date here. They're also on the newer visas, they're even putting the LCA number on it. So it's really saying this visa is attached to this LCA. So if there's been any significant changes, if you're going to file a new LCA and your title has changed, your salary has changed, you've gone from part-time to full-time, those are considered material changes. And those really do need a new visa. What if you, okay, so the question then is, okay, well, what if everything on my LCA is exactly the same as when they adjudicated it at the consulate? What about that? Can I stay? Well, that maybe you could argue, but when I look at that, I say, well, in practice you can argue it, but the regulations don't anywhere say that you're actually allowed to do that. So what's going to happen is you're going to hang out here on this visa that's expired and this new LCA because you took advantage of an I-94 that was incorrect technically. So now when you go to renew your visa and you present your old passport to the immigration officer and they look at it and they say, and now it's December, and they say, well, hang on a minute, yes, your visa expired in March. And you're coming here, it's December, and you've been in the United States. How are you hanging out there in the United States? And you say, well, I filed another LCA. And so, because I had a long dated I-94 because the immigration officer marked it incorrectly when I last came in. So took advantage of that, filed another LCA, and I think I'm allowed to do that and stay here and work on that. And so that's what I did. And the immigration officer might turn around and say, well, where can you back that up? Where in the regs does it say you can do that? Nowhere, but I'm just making this up because it makes sense that I could do this. And the immigration officer says, well, no, really, you can't actually do that. And an immigration officer always has discretion, has ultimate discretion as to whether to approve or deny a visa. In their discretionary ability, the things that they think about or look at is, how long did you stay in the US in a situation that may not have been 100% kosher or right? So, and they've got sort of like this 6-month rule. So if you've been here a long time in this situation, I think that an immigration officer could potentially say, listen, you took advantage of a wrongly dated I-94 and you're applying these regs that don't even exist. I just don't think this is great, and it could jeopardize the issuance of that visa. I'm not saying we have not done this and we have not used this for clients. Whenever we have done it, I've recommended that clients do not stay beyond 60 or 90 days in this scenario. Especially during COVID, I think they will be lenient and say, okay, you tried, you were looking for an appointment, you tried to fix it by also having this LCA during this period, you were trying to comply, you weren't really though, but I get it, you didn't do it for too long and you fixed it as soon as you could. So I'll approve your visa. So I think if you're gonna do this, proceed with caution because it potentially could affect the issuance of your visa. And if you are really, concerned with making sure that you're maintaining your status, I think best thing to do would be really to try and get in, then do, but also even worse is to stay here on a long dated I-94 without filing the LCA, because then you're really out of status. So if you're going to stay here on a long dated I-94, make sure you do at least have an LCA that was exactly filed like your previous LCA. So you've got at least some sort of argument to back yourself. But like I said, that argument is not backed by any regulations. So do proceed with caution if you're going to do that. Louisa, I'll point out here on this new visa, more recent visas, they mark not only the LCA number, but they've actually been putting the validity of the LCA on the visa. And I think this is, and then they've been making the expiration date of the visa as long as the validity of the visa. If the expiration of the LCA is less than 2 years away, they'll actually make the visa end earlier than 2 years, which you can see here. This is actually really was issued on December 10th, this visa. And they ended it on October 18th because the LCA ends on October 18th. So they're starting to try and align at least these two dates to try and make it easier for CBP officers when you're coming in to realize that, you know, it will be more likely now that your end date on your I-94 will be this date, because there's 2 out of 3 of what they're doing, that it'll be the end date if they match those two dates. So I wanted to show that just so that people, it's an interesting thing to see the way the evolution of the E3 visa and the way they annotate them. And they're trying to make it easier now for CBP officers by having that LCA expiry on there.
So Zjantelle, seeing that picture of the Opera House, of course, just makes me want to travel. And so this is like the key question at the moment. Where can I go to process my visa?
Oh, it's the $1 million question always. Oh my gosh, I get this question every day. Of course, again, Australia is an option. I'm not going to go too in depth in the Australia option because we went in depth in this last time when we did our webinar. So people can definitely refer to those slides and notes and that webinar. But just to recap it, you know, the difficult thing with Australia is that reason people don't want to go right now is because it's so costly to get there. And then you've got that quarantine. But in terms of cost, I had a client call me 2 days ago, and for herself and her 2 children, she paid 12 grand a ticket just to get back to Australia. She was willing to do it because she wants to go back long term. But certainly people aren't going to pay that just to go home for the holidays, 36 grand for their family of 3 for premium economy, not even business class tickets. So it's a little bit crazy. If you can get back to Australia, which no one wants to right now because of the cost and the quarantine, but if you can, you know, you've got that option if you're renewing in the same visa category of doing the mail-in. Someone did ask, how long is the mail-in taking? Can you do the mail-in while you're in quarantine? Answer to that is no. You've got to wait till you're out of quarantine, but you can do it the day you get out of quarantine. And it's taking about a week, sometimes sooner, from when you get out of quarantine and if you mail it in right on that day to get it back. Even appointments. So one cool thing is that we have, so a lot of people were having to request emergency appointments in Australia. We have a regularly scheduled appointment on the December 17th, which is right now it's the 16th in Australia. So tomorrow, for those of you who are sitting in Australia right now, that has not been cancelled. So that client's going to be going to that appointment. Typically they get cancelled at least a week or 2 in advance. So we are thinking that's going to go through, which is really exciting. So for people that do need a visa appointment, if you can get an appointment that's within a time frame right now in Australia that will work for you, then you may not necessarily need to convert that to an emergency appointment. Whereas before we were seeing regularly scheduled appointments were getting cancelled. And the only ones that were sticking were ones that had been changed to an expedite or emergency appointment. So that's a really cool update, Louisa, and one that should make some people happy, because getting that emergency appointment can be a bit arduous for people. Okay. So what if you don't want to go back to Australia? The bigger question that everyone's been asking is, you know, where can I go? Which consulates are issuing visas? And the people that are in this situation are aware that it really is a moving target, just as it's been the whole pandemic. We've got Mexico City's been a pretty good constant. There was a period where they were really accepting appointments and emergency appointments quite easily. They changed that. They changed the way that you would apply for an emergency appointment, and people pivoted and were able to figure that out. And so they're, you know, sometimes approving, sometimes not, emergency appointments in Mexico City right now. We've got consulates that we've managed to obtain people visa E3 visa renewals at, or first time appointments have been obviously Australia, yes, or they're obvious, but other than Mexico City, we've had Toronto, Stockholm. We've got 2 people going to Stockholm coming up. Paris, Bern, Athens, Singapore, Dubai, Tel Aviv, Santiago. We've got 2 people in Santiago this week, and among others. So even though I've listed all of those, it really depends on the person's situation as to where they can go, because depending on certain factors, you might have more options open to you than someone else. So whenever I consult with a client on, you know, and they say, where can I go? There's a few things that I ask right off the bat. Do you have another passport? Because that opens up countries that they might be able to get into. Do you have a spouse that's a US citizen or permanent resident? Do you have any kids that are US citizens or permanent resident? And because those other 2 answers to the other 2 questions also can open up consulates that they might be able to go to. Because sometimes it's that just getting there is what's preventing people from getting a visa appointment. Some of these consulates, such as Stockholm and Athens and Paris and so forth, and Bern and Toronto, are doing visa appointments, but people just can't get there. So the first thing I look at is what countries can you travel to? So first thing we look at is the IATA website, and I've put the website there. It shows you can click on a country and it shows you who's able to get in there right now. It's constantly being updated. So you might need to renew your visa in February and think you're traveling in February and look at it now, but it might change in January. So you just got to keep checking it. And then, like I said, do you have any other passports other than Australian passports? So just to be transparent, the people that we actually have done Vancouver too. So the people that we did in Canada, they had dual Australian and Canadian citizenship, which allowed them to get into Canada. The other person that was going to do Canada so to get into Canada right now, you need to be either a Canadian citizen, Canadian permanent resident, married to a Canadian citizen or married to a Canadian permanent resident, or in a de facto relationship with a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. So we had a client who had a long-term girlfriend who's Canadian. They weren't even married, but Canada recognizes that, and he could have gone into Canada because of that long-term relationship and showing that he was in that de facto relationship. And the consulates will grant you an E3 interview right now in Canada, but they won't grant it until you've done 2 weeks of quarantine there. So this particular client, while Canada became an option for him, decided he didn't want to go to Canada because he didn't want to sit there for 2 weeks and then do the visa appointment, which meant he'd be in Canada for 3 weeks. So he actually ended up choosing Mexico City, that client. But it was an option. We had another client who was able to go there because his wife was going to go and do a TN. So you want to look at, do you have a spouse? You know, what options does that open up? And go from there. So once you've determined what countries you can travel to and whether you can travel back from there, considering these travel restrictions between Schengen, UK, Republic, Ireland, Brazil, and so forth are still in place. So you know now you can get into a country and back out of it. And now you want to know, can you get an appointment there, either a regular appointment or an emergency appointment? And the only way you can do that is by paying the $205 in that consulate. You can book an appointment. Sometimes you're seeing appointments that are like not until July of next year. But what you can do is request an emergency appointment. And we have seen those get approved. And if you get an emergency appointment approved, great. Those, so far, every single emergency appointment we've gotten for someone has gone ahead. Regularly scheduled appointments have not always gone ahead and have often gotten cancelled. So we just got into the habit of requesting emergency appointments. Although this week, and we were so fortunate that we had this client that was willing to be a bit of a guinea pig, because she had a regularly scheduled appointment in Mexico City in Mexico, that you do the biometrics and the visa appointment on two separate, it's at two separate locations, and sometimes it can be on two separate days. For the emergency appointments, they have been aligning them on the same day. You go do biometrics and then you go to the consulate. But hers, as a regularly scheduled appointment, she had her biometrics last Friday, and then we were like, are they going to cancel? Are they going to cancel that regular appointment on Monday? But they didn't. And she's already got the visa now. She went back today, got the visa. She has the visa in hand. And that was a regularly scheduled appointment. So that's a huge development there, Louisa. So if you manage to get a regularly scheduled appointment that is within a time frame that suits you and your visa renewal, then you could, and if you're willing to, you could wait to see if that goes ahead. If it gets cancelled, then you pay the $205 somewhere else and try and get an appointment somewhere else. But I did want to just point out that I think that as the consulates start to resume regular visa processing, perhaps people don't have to be too stressed about getting these emergency appointments approved. Also because they have gotten a bit harder to get approved. Before I had mentioned that typically the way to get an emergency appointment is to highlight how your role substantially benefits the economic recovery of the United States. Now the consulates really want to see that your role is related to these sectors of critical infrastructure, healthcare, COVID-19 care or research, defense of the United States, law enforcement, and these other areas. So if you do need an emergency appointment, typically you want to relate your role to one of these critical areas to get that emergency visa appointment approved. And certainly if you're stuck on that, there are attorneys that will help you that have done this a million times that can help you to get an appointment. So far, we've managed to get an appointment for every single client that has needed one. We came down to the wire with someone that was here on visa waiver, and she had a job offer. She actually was a teacher, and you would think that that is a really important role, right? The future of the United States is hinging on the education of children, which is completely suffering in America right now. And we found it hard to get an emergency appointment approved. We tried Belize, Mexico, Dominican Republic. We tried so many consulates for her. And eventually now she is actually going to Chile. She's leaving tomorrow morning. So, and we have another client who did already do their visa in Chile, got it issued, has a visa in hand. So that's good.
So just to add another step into the process, can you talk a little bit about this process that's involved with COVID testing as you go through this visa process?
That's a great question. So yeah, in addition to, checking if you can get into the country, double check if you need a visa to get in there as well, obviously, and what the country's requirements are of getting in. So right on point, the clients that have gone to, so Mexico City doesn't need a COVID test. Canada requires one after you've entered. So certain countries do need COVID tests, and Chile that I just mentioned does require that you have a COVID test that was taken 72 hours before departure. That Chile actually also requires that Australians get a visa to go there. So just you will need to navigate that. But if you have another passport, you can easily go there. So that's another benefit of having another passport at this time. And also, the other interesting thing that Chile required and asked people upon arrival is they needed to have insurance covering at least $30,000 of insurance that also covers COVID insurance. So definitely check. If you do get an appointment somewhere at one of these consulates, you want to double check if there's any other requirements of getting into the country, like COVID testing, insurance, visas, those sorts of things. Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, so what if we have somebody who just doesn't want to get on a plane right now, and there are tons of people like that who just do not want to travel? What are your options for renewing a visa?
Yep. So we went through the I-129 process in real detail last time, Louisa. So I don't want to go through it in lots of detail here because I don't want to run out of time. And I know time's gone by so quick. But I'll just touch on it. Yes, there is a way to renew your E3 from within the US. The hurdles with that and what you've got to consider is the E3 is not qualified for premium processing. So that's not such a big deal for someone who's renewing their E3 because they automatically get 240 days of extended employment while it's pending. However, we are seeing that they are even taking longer than 240 days right now to approve or adjudicate these E3s. In fact, someone called our office yesterday who is not previously a client, but he said, oh, my employer filed an I-129 for an extension and my 240 days expires tomorrow and I got an RFE today. What am I going to do? So that guy's options are, he's going to either respond to the RFE, but it takes time to prepare a response to the RFE, and then submit the RFE and then wait for USCIS to adjudicate it. So that could take another 3 months and he won't be authorized to work in that time. So for him, maybe he aborts the I-129 filing and goes on consular processes. So you got to think about these things. It's taking time, and it could cause another hurdle to file an I-129, even for an extension. For a change of employer, even worse. You can't start working for the new employer until it gets approved, and they're taking upwards of 6 months to approve these. So for some people, that's just not an option. So those people might decide to consular process, or if they really, if it's a change of employer and they really cannot travel, then I think what you want to look at is, are there any other options? So this likelihood of RFE and special occupation size and revenues of companies, I speak about that a lot in our last webinar. So I'll just tell anyone that if anyone is planning to file an I-129, look at that webinar first to see if you think you're a good candidate. But if not, and you've determined that an I-129 extension, it might not be ideal for you, and you really still can't travel abroad right now because you're compromised, your health is compromised, you live with someone whose health is compromised, you have kids, you have like relatives, you live with someone who's elderly, you know, so many reasons why, with people with asthma, you know, so many reasons why people just really can't travel right now. So some of the strategies we used this year was, we looked at, we said, you know what, you might qualify for more than one visa. You don't necessarily have to stay on the E3. Is there any other visa category that you could switch to which has premium processing? Because then we can file a petition and then in 2 weeks you get approved, especially if it's a change of employer, you get approved and you can start working and you don't have to leave. So this has been something we've really taken advantage of. So for example, we had one client, he's got 2 kids, he's got his wife, he really 100%, he couldn't travel. He had a ton of work on, he was really busy. He didn't want to trek his family anywhere. And we said, you know what? You're actually pretty special. You're pretty extraordinary, in fact. You won awards for your work? Oh, yeah, I have. Do you have press about you? Oh, yeah, I do. Oh, and there's press about your work too. Oh, that's really cool. So we determined that he actually qualified for an O1. So an O1's for aliens of extraordinary ability. And normally you can tell if someone is extraordinary if they, you know, the USCIS has certain guidelines, but typically it's they've won awards, they've press about them, they've played a leading role in an event or production or in something that they've done, or they might have a higher salary compared to others in their field. So if someone can qualify as extraordinary, they could very well switch from an E3 to an O1 in the US. And so we did that a couple of times during the pandemic and now. What if you worked for this employer previously and you might have, even at the outset when you first came, you qualified for an L1, but the E3 was just quicker and cheaper to get. So at that time, your employer got you an E3, but now you don't want to travel. And you could file a change of status to L1 here pretty quickly and have an answer really quick without having to wait. So for some people, we switched them to an L1. F1, so the group of people that we saw, a lot of people that we changed to F1 this year were children, E3 dependents that are the children of principal E3 holders that are aging out of the E3D. So when you hit 21, you can no longer be on the E3 dependent visa of your parent. So we had a few people here in that situation, who were hitting 21 and we needed to get them an F1 student visa. J1. So while the J1 got caught up in that proclamation, as I said before, and they weren't issuing the visas, if you were here in the US, you actually could change status to J1. So we did that for a young girl. She'd arrived in the US on March 14th to work with a company, a recruitment company, and the Monday came around and the employer, everything went into lockdown. The employer said, we're not going to start you just yet. We'll probably start you, back then everyone thought the world was going to go back to normal in a month or two. We'll probably start you in 30 days. That turned to 60 days. That turned into, we don't know if we're giving you a job anymore. And, she's like, I just came here on this E3 and I haven't even started working. And there were certain requirements around having to start work on the E3. So we actually determined for her that she had graduated within the last 12 months and that she qualified for the summer work travel J1, which would allow her to work for any employer. So we worked with an umbrella company and got her a DS 2019 issued. She couldn't leave, get the J1 and come back, but we were able to file a change of status for her in the US to the J1. And even though that category doesn't qualify for premium processing, she was allowed to stay here while it's pending. And now, after December 31st, when the proclamation ends, if she does need to travel, she'll be able to leave, get that J1 put in her passport, and come back in on that. Similarly, I've given a few examples now, and I'm conscious of time, but if you're a dual Canadian or Mexican citizen, we do have a client that was Australian Mexican and switched to a TN, H1B, H1B1 if you're Singaporean or Chilean. H1B1 is for Singaporean Chileans is very much like the E3. Process is very similar to the E3, unlike the regular H1B. H3 trainee, you could switch to a tourist visa for a certain amount of time and stop working. If you really don't want to travel right now and you just say, look, you know what, I'd rather even just stop working for a little bit and hang out here as a tourist until I can safely travel. So again, the above list is not exhaustive, but it's just an example of how there are so many options available to people that might not even see at the outset. And so this is where really, meeting with an immigration lawyer that can guide you through asking you the right questions can really put those options out on the table for you so that you can really decide what's best for you and hopefully have something that works for you in this time where nothing feels like it's working for anyone. Again, if you did file a change of status or if you did file an I-129 extension of E3, when you're filing within the US, you don't get a visa sticker put in your passport. So people have to be aware that the next time they travel out of the country, they're going to have to get that visa put in their passport to come back. So in essence, if you're filing an I-129 for the E3, you're doing it twice if you're going to be traveling in the next 2 years anyway. So that might also encourage people to just go consular process. But again, like if you change status to any of these categories, next time you travel internationally, you've got to get that visa put in your passport to re-enter the US. And then the other strategy we used was some people were getting married and we said, okay, let's file your adjustment of status now. That will keep you here and give you ability to work. Some people were at an appropriate point in their employment-based green card process to also be able to file the adjustment of status, and that saved a few people from having to renew their visas.
Zjantelle, we've got 3 questions, 5 minutes left, and I really want to get to the green card part of your presentation. So basically, you're going to have to talk really fast.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to run through these questions?
Should I? I'm going to go through the green card because there were a lot.
Yeah. Okay, go straight to that.
I'm going to really go straight into this. So
if we have time at the end, I'll come back to the questions, but go for it.
Yeah. So the people I really want to address are green card holders that are stuck outside the country that left in March and thought they were going to come back, because there were probably about 10 people in that situation that sent in questions and said, I can't get back and I don't want to come back. And I'm coming up the 365-day mark. I've heard I'm going to lose my green card if I don't come in by the 365th day. Am I going to lose my green card? So I just want them to know they're not going to lose their green card. While you can be deemed to have abandoned your permanent resident status if you're out 365 days or more, If you can really show evidence that you did not intend to abandon it, you can argue it upon your next entry to the United States. So upon your next entry to the United States, you want to bring evidence that you continue to file your tax return, you continue to maintain a property in the US, you continue to have your credit card and bills in the US. So you want to show your nexus, that you really kept your ties to the US. And if you show that, if the immigration officer questions you and says, look, it looks like you were out more than a year, I think you've abandoned your green card, you can say, no, I didn't intend to abandon my green card. And they cannot, this is important for people to know, they cannot, the immigration officer cannot force you to give up your green card at that point in time. You can say, if they are really putting the heat on you and saying you need to give up your green card, you can say, I would like to request a hearing before an immigration judge. So they have to give you that. So they have to let you in on the green card and then schedule you before an immigration judge where you can plead that you did not intend to give up your green card. I've actually never seen anyone have to get to that point, quite honestly. I've seen everyone that even has come in, even up until a year and a half after. I'm not saying stay out a year and a half, but I'm just saying that if you can't get in by that 365 days, try and come as soon as you can. But if it's past that, do not freak out. You will be able to get in. You just make your case at the airport to say you did not intend to abandon your permanent residence status. The immigration officer will let you in. Worst case scenario, you need to present yourself in front of an immigration judge, but chances are you'll get to keep your green card in that instance. There is the ability for people, and this is important for people that are here right now. Some people lost this opportunity because they left without doing it, and you do need to be in the US for this. Which is filing a re-entry permit. If you're in the US right now and you're thinking we're thinking of going back to Australia, I highly encourage those people right now to file a re-entry permit. You need about a month here in the US to do it because you have to be physically in the US when you file, and then they will schedule you for a biometrics appointment, which comes up about 3 to 4 weeks from when you file. You need to go to that biometrics appointment. At that point, you can leave. The re-entry permit can get sent to your attorney, who can then send it to you, and that will preserve your green card for you. You can stay out of the United States up to 2 years on that without coming back, and you can stay outside the country in peace, with peace of mind, knowing that your green card has been preserved. You've made this outward act to say, I'm saying now, I'm going for 2 years, but I don't want to give up my green card. And that will 100% protect your green card. The people that missed out on that and are in Australia now have asked, can I file this from Australia? You can't. You absolutely have to be back in the US. It's an absolute requirement. There's no way around it. So you do need to come back, be here for about a month. You can come back, do this, and then go back to Australia. So for some people that are thinking, I need to come back, I need to, clean up some things, and then I do want to go back to Australia for a little bit of time, just because while the US is, in this little bit of a messy state, those people should really consider re-entry permits and talk to your immigration attorney about that. And I'm speed talking now. The other category is just, if you file a re-entry permit, and if you do stay out more than 365 days, you will start the clock again as to when you can qualify for US citizenship, because US citizenship has 2 requirements, which is a physical presence requirement and a continuous presence requirement. Continuous presence meaning that you can't have a trip more than 180 days outside the United States, and if you do, you'll start your clock again, and or you need to have at least 2.5 in the last years and out of the last 5 years of physical presence in the US, unless you got married to a US citizen and that's how you got your green card, then it's 1.5 out of the last 3 years physical presence in the US. So if you start to stay outside of the US for long periods of time, you may jeopardize when you will qualify to apply for US citizenship. So if you're really just worried about your green card right now, that's fine. It's not as huge a deal. If you're worried about when you're going to qualify for citizenship, then this is when you want to talk to an immigration lawyer to figure out how long can I stay out before I jeopardize my ability. Worst case scenario, you're going to have to come back to the US and start your clock again, and you won't be able to file until 4.5 years after being back for citizenship, or 2.5 years of being back if you're married to a US citizen to file for citizenship. All right, Louisa, I think I spoke. Disclaimer, obviously, this is not legal advice. Everyone's situation is personal to them. They should seek an immigration lawyer if it's for their particular situation. Quickly ask me those questions, because I know they were really good ones. I'll speed answer.
No, I'm going to ask you the one which is it's about people wanting to get family members over from Australia. Do you have any tips for people how would they go about doing that? For example, we're having a child soon. We want mum to come over from Australia, but we're not sure how to, given the restrictions on leaving Australia at the moment.
Louisa, the most amazing thing about this pandemic is that childbirth rates have gone up, I'm sure. I've had so many clients call me with this exact same question saying, we're having twins. Oh, I'm pregnant, we're due. Now we're thinking maybe we're gonna have to go back to Australia because originally mum was gonna come over and help us out. And now mum can't get out of Australia. Our relatives can't get out of Australia to come visit us. That's not the case. So just don't think that your relatives can't get out of Australia right now. We've seen a lot of people get granted the exemption to leave Australia, even though that is Australian immigration law, and I'm a US immigration attorney. We have seen, as long as you say you're going to be, the person says they're not going to be leaving for a week or 2 weeks, and they do say they're going to be gone for at least 3 months, we have seen those exemptions get approved, so you can get your relative to come into the US if they want to. And if that works. It's a different story if they don't want to come because of the pandemic, but they can come if they really are willing to get on a plane.
Zjantelle, I think we're going to wrap up on that note, and thank you so much for your upbeat presentation. It really provided a lot of clarity and reassurance, I think, and some great information. Zjantelle referred to a previous webinar that we did with her. That is available on her website and on the American Australian Association's website, as will this presentation also be available. Is that right, Zjantelle? You're happy to make the slides available?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so slides and a recording in case there's anything that you missed. So thanks so much for joining us.
Louisa, can I just put in?
Yeah, jump in.
That one person that asked, I want to get an F visa issued abroad right now. Is it going to be a problem? I just want to throw in there that it's not, you can get an F visa issued abroad, but you just have to be able to show that you are going to have in-person classes at school. So you want a letter from the school that says in-person classes, because if all your classes are remote, you will have a problem getting that F1 issued. So I just wanted to address that for that one person, because it was only one person's question, but I know we've had that come up along the way. So just wanted to throw that in there for good measure.
No, that's perfect. Thank you for remembering. There are so many small details, so I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience does as well.
Yeah, of course. It's been a pleasure. And look, things are always changing, so I'm happy to do another update in the new year once, if anything changes, especially with the new administration come into play and so forth. And between now and then, I hope that everybody has a safe and happy holiday season. I know that for many it's tough because they can't be with their loved ones, but hopefully they can be on Zooms and still try to enjoy this time.
Well, we're just all excited about the new year and what 2021 will bring. So from everyone at the American Australian Association, happy holidays, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year.